what on earth to do about Elon Musk. You know, do we play nicely and try and cozy up to him and be nice to him?
Because politicians have been supine and weak and unimaginative and not willing to actually grapple with internet regulation, it's meant that they've just let it be a Wild West. And Musk could come along with that electoral weakness, that media weakness, and throw everything into the mix.
And that money finds a way. Money will always find a way into a system.
But that's not true.
Before you watch today's episode, we want to remind you that tickets are on sale for the Newsagents live shows with HSBC UK. We're kicking off our tour at the Birmingham Symphony Hall on February the 17th. Then we're off to the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester the following week on the 24th. And finally, the Usher Hall in Edinburgh on March the 11th. Head over to Global Player to get your tickets for any of these dates. The link will be in the description below. And we're very excited to see you there.
X will help reform UK at the election coming up.
He's already given me considerable help.
With targeting voters who can't
Understanding the process from start to finish, reaching disaffected communities who frankly feel there's no point voting for anybody, but just to get them to agree with you or to like me on TikTok or whatever, that just isn't enough. You know, you've got to get them registered, you've got to know who they are, you've got to get them to vote. Inevitably, given all the press stories, we did discuss money. Now, that's a negotiation we will go back and have again. He is not against giving us money. He hasn't fully decided whether he will.
Let it be said that no one shows a bit of leg better than Nigel Farage, teasing, tempting you to believe that the money is in the bank already for reform from Elon Musk and that they see eye to eye and they think alike. Christmas has come early for Farage as he was in Mar-a-Lago with his new treasurer cozying up to Elon Musk.
Today we're going to be looking at the tentacles between Elon Musk, reform and the next UK general election. Can an election be bought, and can a party of government do anything to stop a lot of money coming in from overseas? Welcome to the Newsagents.
It's John.
It's Emily.
It's Lewis.
We are going to be talking a little bit later on this podcast to Radek Sikorski, who is the Polish foreign minister, and his government has managed to beat back the populists in Poland, the Law and Order Party, and reclaim what they would consider to be the centre ground, the centre-right ground. And so we're going to start with the photograph that emerged overnight from Mar-a-Lago, which shows Nick Candy, Treasurer of Reform, Nigel Farage, Leader of Reform, Elon Musk of Musk, and a picture of a young Donald Trump in a golf sweater.
Well, I thought it looked like he'd been playing cricket, which
Maybe.
I suspect
He hasn't.
Donald Trump has never played cricket in his life. But yeah, under this ridiculous portrait in Mar-a-Lago, which I just thought underlined the indivisibility at the moment between Musk and Trump.
He hasn't left there for about a month.
So Musk has
Basically
moved.
got a room
It's
there.
a shame because Musk, I'm sure he could afford to live somewhere else. You know, rent a little place nearby.
I think Elon can afford to live anywhere.
Exactly. And yet he is permanently at Donald Trump's side and is seemingly his emissary when Farage goes to Mar-a-Lago.
I thought it was an astounding picture, clearly completely calibrated to do exactly what Farage wants, which is to get us all talking about his links with the court of Trump. I mean, actually, one of the sort of quietly important bits potentially of the story is that, not least because we're distracted by the kind of luster of this picture, is that Farage apparently did not meet with Trump personally, which I'm sure he will have been disappointed by, given that he had gone all the way to Florida and gone all the way to Mar-a-Lago and would have dearly liked to see the president-elect himself. But in a classic kind of Farageist fashion, he's managed to compensate for it with this picture with Musk, which has got the entire British media talking, and again has got everyone talking about the possibility, not least because of Musk's constant kind of affirmation of an endorsement of reform on Twitter X, the possibility of Musk providing financial resources for reform, which has now long been rumoured.
I guess this goes back a couple of weeks to that initial sum that circulated. We don't know where it came from, of Musk donating $100 million to reform. And at the time we discussed it and the sort of vehicles that you would need to get money from a US billionaire into a UK political party. And there is a way to do that, which is through LLCs, through a limited liability company, which was domained in the UK. That would have to be either the ex-UK arm or the Tesla UK arm, not in an election campaign. Now, that sum was sort of thrown out and then immediately dismissed. But the picture, I think, is meant to reinforce the fact that even though we don't know the sums, the conversations are happening. And I guess it reopens all the questions about whether you can legislate for this in terms of social media, legislate for this in terms of campaign financing, or just somehow change the conversation so that none of that is important. I mean, what we're asking fundamentally is, can an electorate be bought?
I think that British politics, the top of British politics, ministers, are asleep at the wheel on this. I find the lack of urgency about this possibility quite astonishing and surprising. And I don't think Labour MPs are similarly asleep, by the way. I think lots of Labour MPs are really worried about it. But I find, although I think there are stirrings at the top of government, I find it surprising the extent of the kind of dormancy of it. We are, I think, at a unique moment where both the antiquated nature of our electoral law and the law that exists with regards to online media in Britain could come together, a confluence, a unique kind of coming together nexus, which means that we are at a point of real vulnerability for someone like Musk to come along with a lot of money as a sort of foreign agent, if you like, and try and buy a UK election, or if not buy a UK election because the campaigns themselves are more tightly regulated, to be able to wield unique interference. We have never seen this amount of money or anything like this amount of money flow into UK politics. And of course, it used to be said that British elections could not be bought like American elections because we had such tight regulation, as we've been talking about for weeks, of the TV radio space. That has gone. That has died because because politicians have been supine and weak and unimaginative and not willing to actually grapple with internet regulation. It's meant that they've just let it be a Wild West. And Musk could come along with that electoral weakness, that media weakness, and throw everything into the mix.
I think that what is so interesting about it is that you say the politicians are asleep at the wheel. They're not asleep at the wheel. You speak to any of them, they're all terrified of reform. Yeah, it's the lack of action. Yeah. I was with senior government ministers at the weekend. One of them saying, absolutely, the main threat we've got is reform at the moment. They're not worried about Kemi Badenoch. They're worried about reform. They're worried about the relationship that reform seems to have with Elon Musk. The checks may not have been signed yet. The money may not be flowing in. But by God, the tweets are. The support on X is already there.
Isn't the question whether it comes down to technicalities or something more fundamental, which is about message and communication? So yes, there are things you could probably do to campaign financing. Yes, there are probably moves you could make, as we've seen in Australia, which limit the access that X has to, under 16s or whatever. But fundamentally, the kind of crossroads we're at for all these centrist governments, that still exist are, do you need to change your language? Do you need to change your message? Do you just need to get things done while you're in power? Is that the way that you stop populism in its tracks? I don't know.
Yeah, that's part of it. You've got a twin track assault at the moment, which I think which makes it so unique. Is that one, you've got the power of Elon Musk's algorithm almost being kind of lent. We will give prominence to your messaging, and by the way, you can have my money as well.
Yeah.
And if the British government, whether it be a Labour government or a Conservative government, wanted to stop that, it would have needed to take much more dramatic legislative measures than it seems prepared to, because as far as I know, there's nothing on the books that is changing the rules anytime soon.
It was in the Labour Party manifesto to review our electoral and election law to ensure that there could not be foreign interference in our elections and to ensure that the system was robust. That was literally in the manifesto. So they have a mandate for it. In fact, they should be doing it anyway, irrespective of Musk, because it's in their manifesto. And Emily, I hear you in a way, we've talked about this in various different forms over the last few weeks, and I think we've returned to it because it is so important. It is basically, I think, the central question of 2025 and beyond is if you are a sort of either a centre-left or centre-right government, how do you take these populist right forces on? Is it through what you do? Is it what you tell? Is it both? I happen to think that this government could deliver in every direction. But if you had this $100 million, and by the way, why should it stop being $100 million?
Well,
It's
Nick
small
Candy's
change.
saying he's going to do 40 million on his own.
Well,
right?
yeah. Well, exactly. So you've already got Nick Candy and others sort of potentially putting money in. If Musk was putting $100 million this year, he could do it again next year. He could put in 200 million. It's like the rest of us putting 10 pence in. There's no reason that it could stop. Even if you delivered and delivered well, that would be so transformative in what we know is the modern political media environment where content is king, where narrative is everything. It would sweep all before it. And I see people online, when I've sort of been tweeting and writing about this in the last couple of weeks, saying Labour needs to get a move on to deal with this. And by the way, it's not a left-wing thing. This shouldn't care whether you're Labour or Conservative. You should care about the potential of loads of foreign money coming in to really influence and potentially toxify our politics. Everyone should care about that. People saying, well, Labour will get a load of flack if they were to be seen to be changing the rules to stop this happening. Yeah, maybe they would get some flack. Yeah, Farage would cry foul. He would say you were rigging the game. Far better to absorb that political pain than the alternative, which is the money potentially flowing in and creating all sorts of problems.
It's not necessarily. I mean, they can change electoral donation law and the money could still come in, as discussed, through different companies. And, it's worth noting that Elon Musk's estimated net worth has now leapt to 486 billion. He's actually made 224 billion since the US election. So this is, as you said, this is peanuts, right? Which suggests that you can't win the game by an arms race of spending or even controlling spending. You've actually got to win it in a much more fundamental way by saying to the British public, do you really want this guy buying you up?
But I think the other bit of uncertainty in all of this from the government is what on earth to do about Elon Musk. Do we play nicely and try and cozy up to him and be nice to him? And, it was kind of argued that one of the great failings of Biden was that, he was rude about EVs, electronic vehicles, at some conference, and that Musk took offence at the way he spoke to him.
That was what lost the election.
No, but it may have been one of the things that lost Musk, where Musk suddenly goes foursquare in behind Donald Trump.
But in which case, how can you manage that?
I know, but then exactly. But
we are in a world where political power is not as great as financial power.
And we shouldn't be talking
maybe
about
it was. Maybe it was always thus.
It was always thus, but it's even more striking now when you've got a South African-born American billionaire who is the world's richest man saying, I'm going to throw so much money that we've never seen in UK politics.
The other thing is, you wouldn't necessarily even have to tighten the law up that much. I mean, yeah, of course, Musk is a very innovative, highly, resourceful individual. And if he really wants to get this money in, he will try and find a way. And doubtless to some extent he will succeed. But one thing you could do is make sure that the Electoral Commission is doing its job. The Electoral Commission under current law could deem, let's say he puts it through Tesla, the Electoral Commission could say, we say that this is a foreign donation. It might come through a UK subsidiary, but we deem this to be a foreign donation. It shouldn't be allowed. Problem is, the Electoral Commission has been a toothless body for many, many, many years, and I doubt would have the guts to do that if it did happen. So Labour should bolster the Electoral Commission to make sure that it finally shows some guts when dealing with these matters.
Do you know what? You can do this from within. I don't think that any change to electoral law or any change to campaign finance is going to stop Musk's money or Nick Candy's money getting into the system if they want to put more money into the system. There has to be a more wholesale and wholesome way of fighting populism than just saying we've closed up every single little monetary loophole.
I completely disagree with that. I think that, yeah, of course there's got to be a different way of fighting it. But one of the we all know how utterly toxic big money has been in American campaign financing, particularly since
and that money finds a way. Money will always find a way into a system.
But that's not true. The Citizens United judgment made a qualitative difference in the Supreme Court in terms of the amount of money in the system. That actually made the legal architecture did make a difference in terms of the amount of money when they decided that basically the corporations could pay as much.
Because the first person to break that was Obama. He spent £1 billion. Yeah, because he went straight through it.
Of course, but that's because the system then everyone then had to play by the rules of that game as the system currently existed. So what I'm saying is that of course, look, there's always going to be, and you fuse this, is what I'm saying, with an unregulated digital space, then that, of course, money is going to be a problem. But you can change the architecture. The rules of the game do matter, and they have to be enforced, or they have to be, or the arbiters of the game have to be willing to tighten the system.
I'm just going to add one footnote, which goes back to Trump not meeting Farage. This is a sign, maybe a small sign, and maybe this is an irrelevant footnote, of Trump playing by the rules, actually, in a way that he didn't in the first term, because it's interesting that before he becomes president, he's choosing who he will meet, and it would be unusual and raise eyebrows for him to meet the leader of an opposition party before meeting the Prime Minister at Mar-a-Lago. And I wonder whether there is a bit of formality of process that maybe his new chief of staff, Susie Wiles, has brought in that has led to that.
I think that is all done with Trump's blessing. That's why they're underneath the photo.
But that's
and
why
maybe
Trump's
Elon
not
Musk
there.
is the treasurer. Yeah, I don't think it makes a jot of difference if Trump's there or not.
But it shows that Trump is playing by
Well, I think it shows that
rules.
Elon Musk has been given the power to go and talk to whoever he
Both
wants
things
about
can be
this.
true.
Yeah.
We will be back in a moment with someone who has successfully fought populism, Radek Sikorski, the Foreign Minister of Poland.
Well, joining us now in an exclusive interview is Radek Sikorski, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland. Welcome, Minister. It's lovely to have you here. You've seen populism rise in your country and take power, and you've seen it defeated. When you look at this picture, the photograph of political, financial, technological, international power around one tableau, all deciding the way forward for the funding of the next UK election. What is your sense?
Well, I won't comment on your politics, but populists become popular when they latch on to an issue that the establishment neglected. And it is actually the same issue in the United States, in Britain and in Poland, namely migration. And a wise establishment takes the issue and solves it. Populists offer a simple solution to complex problems. You have to solve the problem. And in Poland, we've done it. We've had a mass assault on our border from Belarus and Russia. We have now built a barrier, and we have now reformed our asylum laws so that people may not force their way into Poland to apply for asylum. They have to wait on the other side. And then you recover people's trust.
So that suggests there is an absolute cause and effect between unsolved business, unsolved problems, and populism. I would say that here we went through the Brexit referendum. It sounded like that was going to be part of a solution, but actually, you know, the populists of Brexit are stronger than ever, even though Brexit doesn't seem to have worked here.
Well, I lived in Britain for years. I was an asylum seeker, a successful one in Britain. I went back to my country. And I think I know what happened. The British public was for decades radically misled about how the EU actually works. And there was not enough pushback from politicians correcting the record. And so the people got the impression that Brexit will solve your migration problem. I understand migration, inward migration is even bigger than before. Actually, Polish people are now going back home.
So it's all about migration. I mean, that's your message. It's all about migration, really.
I think in the United States it was also about inflation. Inflation is now low, but people still remember that the general level of prices used to be much lower. And in politics, luck matters. Sometimes you're unlucky.
So is there a big net outflow now of Poles going back to Poland? Because there was such a long period where, you know, if you wanted any building work done, you couldn't, you know, the best people to call were the Poles because they would do the plastering, the electrics, the plumbing all in one go. And it seemed so much less complicated. Are Poles going home?
Yes, they are. We want our Poles back.
And do they see that there is an economic opportunity now that is driving them back, or just because Britain is a less friendly place to be post-Brexit?
Poland is successful economically. Our wages have risen dramatically over the last 20 years. And people don't generally leave unless they are paid at least double as expats or immigrants. And it's no longer double. Depends on the profession, obviously, and the part of the country and so on. But we think we used to have over 1 million Poles in Britain. We think now it's below 700,000.
I just want to go back to this picture because the question this raises is whether a democratic election can still be bought. I mean, there are perfectly legal means through which, you know, Musk money can get into the UK through companies, through LLCs, all the rest of it. Do you think that a population minds in 2024, 2025, if an election is bought by an outsider?
Well, this is the issue in the Romanian presidential election. Right. Contrary to what you've read in the media, it wasn't a cyber attack from abroad. It was a rich person spending hundreds of thousands of euros paying TikTok to promote a candidate.
A Romanian?
Yes.
Business person?
Yes. So actually, it was a campaign finance issue.
Yeah.
And you have to have laws against it. In Poland, until the last government, there were limits on how much money a candidate can spend, unlike in the United States. You have those laws too. But this was changed in Poland. And so there are still limits on how much the candidate can spend, but other people can spend whatever they want. So it's actually a danger of foreign manipulation, but also oligarchization of politics, which is...
And what do you do here then? I mean, what would you, if you were Starmer...
Well, you have to bring back the limits. The kind of big money in politics is not good for democracy.
Okay, but going back to the photo that we started with, and I know you don't want to be drawn on our UK politics, but when you have someone, the world's richest man, owner of a platform, able to say, right, well, I'm going to not only give money, but I'll give my algorithm to you as well, so that promoted content from your party or whatever will take priority and everyone will see it. That seems to me to be a kind of something completely different from what we've seen in the past. We've had newspaper owners able to kind of write editorials in favour of this one or that one, but this is qualitatively and quantitatively different.
Every form of communication ultimately needs to be regulated. When the first book was printed, it wasn't regulated. When the first radio broadcast or TV broadcast, eventually we found, even newspapers, that there were downsides and that we needed to regulate. And there are some downsides to social media. They affect the attention span of our children. Their algorithms are designed to keep us engaged, and what keeps us engaged is anger. So instead of stimulating civilized debate, they stimulate anger and division. We're not obliged to tolerate this. Their business model is not sacrosanct. If something is bad for our children and bad for our democracy, we can regulate it. And humanity's last hope is the European Parliament, because it is not yet captured by big tech.
But you have in America now, it seems to be, there you have Elon Musk holding a meeting with two British politicians at Mar-a-Lago, the home of Donald Trump. And there is now no difference between the tech billionaire or the media owner and the next president.
The influence of big money and of algorithms in politics, if it's detrimental to democracy, needs to be regulated. Whatever is illegal in the analog world should be illegal in the digital world. Just the fact that it's digital shouldn't give you immunity from the laws of the land. But nation states are powerless to do it. Although some are trying. There's been a judgment in Brazil. The French have actually arrested the owner of Telegram who was breaking EU laws. The Australians are doing something to do with children. The time has come to do this.
I mean, you can talk about individual laws and legislation, but I guess my sense is that the question is much bigger. That for moderate governments or centrist governments, they have not found the language to respond to populism. They have not found the right response to populism. Populism is much more successful on social media.
Wait a second. We won with populists a year ago. And of course the question is, will we get a second term? But you get the second term by delivering what you promised.
And is that because you threw the populists out? Is it just a question of incumbency, do you think, that people don't like incumbents anyway?
Well, populists never deliver on their promises. They usually make you poorer. They usually create mayhem. And you have to go down to the voters. You have to really engage with the people. And that's the only way. I mean, you have to do real politics.
And is there a difference between what the language that you would use now when you're dealing with a populist government, trying to get something out of it, have you changed the language? I mean, if we know that Starmer here, for example, is not really looking to Kemi Badenoch. He's not really looking to the Conservatives. He's looking to Nigel Farage because he thinks that's where the threat comes. Now, you've put it in terms of like, well, solve the issues then, solve the solutions, right? You know, sort out immigration. Is it just...
Europe is a factor in our politics too. So our populists also messed up Poland's relationship with the EU, as a result of which Poland was deprived of tens of billions of euros of financing. We have fixed the relationship. The money is now flowing. Literally yesterday, we got 40 billion euro transfer, thanks to which Polish regions will be building roads, schools and hospitals. This, and we hope that the people will appreciate this.
Foreign Minister, can I just talk to you about Ukraine and what happens in 2025? There will be a new president in the White House. When asked during the debates whether he wanted Ukraine to win, he wouldn't answer the question. What are the prospects for peace, and will it be on Donald Trump's terms?
The only person who could end the war in 5 minutes is, of course, Vladimir Putin, the person who started this war, who invaded Ukraine. He could make a phone call to his chief of staff and say, this has been a mistake, casualties are too huge, the country is going to the dogs, let's end this criminal misadventure. And so the question is, how to incentivize Putin to make that call. And I think Ukraine has enough support, both financially and militarily, for next year. So it's going to get 40-something billion euros from the loan secured on frozen Russian assets, regular EU financing, another 20 or 25 billion. The Biden package will be contracted by the 20th of January. The weapons deliveries will actually last till the middle of next year. And remember, Ukraine has a vibrant indigenous arms industry, really high tech. What they do with drones is amazing. So actually, it's a financial question of whether we will sustain Ukraine.
But we do have a new president. It's worth listening to what Donald Trump was saying very recently on this.
Do you believe that Ukraine should cede territory to Russia?
Well, I'm going to let you know that after I have my first meeting. But a lot of that territory, when you look at what's happened to those, I mean, there are cities that there's not a building standing. It's a demolition site. There's not a building standing. So people can't go back to those cities. There's nothing there. It's just rubble. Just like when I knocked down a building in Manhattan, which is actually, this is worse, actually, because we do it step by step. This thing has just got demolished. And by the way, in those buildings are many people. Many people were in those buildings.
Trump hasn't given a direct answer when asked whether he believed Ukraine should cede territory. Obviously, he's talking about buildings because he doesn't want to answer the question, which is whether he's going to hand a victory, in essence, to Putin. What is your sense?
Well, the question is whether Donald Trump wants to have a failure early in his presidency, like Joe Biden did with the unsightly withdrawal from Afghanistan. And the way I read the man is that, above all, he wants to look like a winner. And that's something the Ukrainians can work with.
Which means what?
Which means that they need to persuade...
We've heard from Zelensky that he knows he won't, he said in the last hour, I think, that he knows that the Donbass won't be returned to Ukraine. So there's already a sense of...
Look, we will not be trading Ukrainian territory on this program, okay? Ukrainians need to convince Donald Trump that they are a part of the solution and that Putin is the problem, that the United States needs to put pressure on Putin to end the war. Because I don't see any indication yet that Putin wants to end the war. I mean, I read in the newspapers that they want to negotiate, but actually, I think Putin still wants Ukraine to capitulate.
And Ukraine is not going to capitulate in the way that maybe Putin wants. Is there a deal to be had along the lines of, okay, Russia, you keep what you've taken, but Ukraine becomes part of Europe, becomes part of the EU, becomes part of NATO?
it is not up to you or me to make these judgments. The Ukrainians have been fighting a war of the extermination of them. Remember, Putin is on the record saying that there is no such place as Ukraine, that Ukraine has no right to exist.
But if Ukraine had Article 5 protection from NATO, then, frankly, Putin is going to think twice.
Ukraine already has Western security guarantees, including British ones. Remember, Britain is party to the Budapest Memorandum, under which Ukraine gave up what was at that time the third largest nuclear stockpile in the world. What are you going to do to back up those guarantees with force?
Minister, we're not litigating what the eventual settlement is. We can't do that. You can't do that. But we are asking whether you can see in what is in front of you any outcome that works for both Ukraine and Russia. I mean, that's fundamentally the question we're asking, right?
Russia's hand is much weaker than Putin's braggadocio would suggest. Putin has used up the stockpile of Soviet-era tanks that was there to be refurbished. His industry makes about 200 tanks per annum. He loses that many per week. Russian economy, if it continues on the current path, will start tanking in about a year. If we sustain Ukraine in the fight, if we convince Putin that we are in it for the medium term, then in a year or so, he will become more reasonable, but not yet.
And what does that mean for the countries of Europe and of NATO's defence spending now? I mean, let's take ours.
Come on. We are a 15 trillion euro economy, we the European Union. The United States about the same. This war has cost us about 0.5% of our European GDP over 3 years.
And you're, I think, the biggest giver,
We have paid much more in sustaining energy prices for our citizens. We are also, including Britain, paying billions of euros and pounds to Ukrainian refugees in our countries. We don't do it, by the way, of draft age. It will be much more efficient and very helpful to Ukraine to tell those people to go back to Ukraine to defend their country. And to give the money to the Ukrainian defense industry.
Put the money at what percentage then? I mean, spell it out. What do you think the percentage of GDP needs to be?
Well, I can tell you what Poland is spending.
I know what it is. It's
we are 4.7% of GDP next year.
So what should we be at?
Because when the Russians threaten us, we believe them. We will not be a Russian colony again, and we will do whatever it takes to deter them.
Foreign Minister, the thing that strikes me listening to what you've just said is that though people may want this war to end as soon as possible, we're in it for the long haul.
Deterring Putin after he has conquered Ukraine would be much more expensive than helping Ukraine to resist. Remember, this is not only about Ukraine. We now have the reality of a Russia-China alliance, and if we establish the principle that you can reconquer your former province, that sets a very bad precedence. So we need to win this, not only for Ukraine, but for global peace as well.
Radek Sikorski, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Well, that is about it from us for today. But tomorrow, we have got a breaking investigation that we will bring you here on the Newsagents. And we've also got the first interview with the owner of Tortoise, James Harding, who has just bought the Observer newspaper. We're bringing you all that tomorrow. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.